You know that feeling. You've just taken a loss. Maybe it was small, maybe it wasn't, but something inside you shifted the moment the trade went against you. And now you're sitting there, staring at your screen, chart pulled up, setup forming, and you can't pull the trigger. Your hand hovers over the mouse. Your mind races. What if this one loses too? What if I'm reading this wrong? What if I'm in a bad streak? I've been there. Every trader has. And I want you to understand something right now, before we go any further. This moment, this exact moment of hesitation, is where most traders lose the game. Not in the market, in their minds. See, the market didn't change after your last loss. The probabilities didn't shift. Your edge didn't disappear. But something in you did change. Your perception changed. Your relationship with risk changed. And now, instead of executing your system, you're negotiating with fear. For years, I studied why traders fail. Not why their strategies fail, why they fail. And what I discovered was this: the market doesn't beat traders. Traders beat themselves. They beat themselves with fear, with doubt, with the need to be right, with the inability to accept what the market is actually offering them. Today, I want to share with you what I learned about taking that next trade, about executing without hesitation, without fear, without the emotional baggage of the last trade or the last 10 trades weighing you down. Because until you can do that, you're not really trading. You're just reacting. Let's begin. After a loss, something happens in your mind that you're probably not even aware of. Your brain, this incredible pattern recognition machine, just recorded an experience. Trade setup appeared. You took action. Pain resulted. And now, without you consciously deciding anything, your brain has created an association. This type of situation equals danger. It's trying to protect you. That's what it's designed to do. But here's the problem. The market doesn't work the way your survival instincts work. In the real world, if you touch a hot stove, you should absolutely remember that pain and avoid touching hot stoves. That's adaptive. That keeps you safe. But in trading, that same mechanism becomes your enemy. Because your last trade, that loser you just took, wasn't the hot stove. It was one outcome in a series of probabilistic events. It was one expression of your edge playing out over time. But your mind doesn't see it that way. Your mind sees threat detected, protect capital, avoid similar situation. And this is where traders get stuck. They start second-guessing their system. They start looking for ways to improve their entries, trying to filter out the losers. They start hesitating, waiting for better setups, not realizing that what they're really doing is trying to eliminate uncertainty from an environment that is, by its very nature, uncertain. I've watched traders take a loss and then completely abandon a winning methodology, not because the methodology failed, but because they couldn't handle the emotional discomfort of being wrong. They couldn't accept that losing is part of the process. And here's what makes this so insidious. The fear feels rational. It feels like wisdom. I should be careful here. I should wait for confirmation. I should make sure this is really the right trade. It sounds responsible. It sounds like discipline. But it's not discipline. It's fear masquerading as prudence. True discipline is executing your edge, consistently, regardless of the outcome of the last trade. True discipline is understanding that you cannot control outcomes. You can only control your process. The mistake most traders make is trying to control the uncontrollable. And in doing so, they give up control over the only thing they actually can control, their own execution. Let me tell you something that might be hard to hear. From the perspective of any single trade, the outcome is random. I know. You've done your analysis. You've studied the chart. You've identified support, resistance, momentum, whatever framework you use. You believe this trade has a high probability of working. And maybe it does over a series of trades. But this particular trade, right here, right now, random. You don't know if this is going to be a winner or a loser. You can't know. There are too many variables you can't see. What every other trader in the world is thinking, what news might drop, what large institution might be moving capital for reasons that have nothing to do with your technical levels. The market is a vast, complex system, and you are interacting with one tiny edge of it. Now, why am I telling you this? Because once you truly accept the random distribution of wins and losses, something remarkable happens. You stop needing each trade to win. Think about that for a moment. Most traders approach each trade with a desperate hope. Please be a winner. Please work out. Please don't let me be wrong again. They're attached to the outcome. They need validation. They need to be right. But a casino doesn't need to win every hand of blackjack. A casino knows that over thousands of hands, the edge plays out. Some hands they lose, some they win. But the math is in their favor, and they trust the math. That's probability thinking. When you understand that your edge is expressed over a sample size, 20 trades, 50 trades, 100 trades, you stop caring so much about this one trade, because you know that in the series, your edge will materialize. You don't need to predict which trades will be the winners. You just need to execute your system and let the probabilities play out. And here's the beautiful part. Once you let go of needing to be right on this trade, you remove the fear. Because fear comes from attachment to outcome. Fear comes from the belief that something bad will happen if you're wrong. But if you truly understand that losing is just part of the distribution, then being wrong doesn't mean anything about you. It doesn't mean you're a bad trader. It doesn't mean your system is broken. It just means this was one of the losers in the series, and that's expected. So how do you get there? How do you shift from fearing the loss to accepting it as just data? It starts with how you define risk. Most traders define risk as, how much money could I lose on this trade? And that's not wrong. That's position sizing, and it matters. But that's not the deepest level of risk. The deepest level of risk is psychological. The real question is, can I take this loss without it affecting my state of mind? Can I lose this money and still execute my next trade cleanly? Because if you can't, if a loss sends you into a spiral of doubt, hesitation, revenge trading, or system hopping, then you're risking more than your capital. You're risking your process. And without your process, you have no edge. This is why I learned to think of each trade as an experiment. Not a bet, not a gamble, not a this has to work. An experiment. I am testing a hypothesis. Given these conditions, my system says there is a probabilistic advantage here. And the outcome of this experiment gives me information. If it wins, great. If it loses, also great. Because both outcomes are just data points in a larger sample. When you frame it this way, you remove the emotional charge. You're no longer losing, you're collecting data. You're no longer wrong. You're observing what the market did. And this shift in perception, this reframe is everything. Let me give you an example. Imagine you're flipping a coin that's weighted 60-40 in your favor. You flip it once. Tails, you lose. Do you look at that result and think, I made a mistake? Of course not. You knew tails was a possibility. You flip again. Tails again. Do you abandon the coin? No, because you understand the probabilities. You know that over 100 flips, you'll come out ahead. That's what trading is. You're flipping a weighted coin over and over. Some flips go against you. That's expected. It's already built into your edge. The only question is, will you keep flipping? Most traders stop. They take a few losses, and they stop flipping. They start questioning the coin. They start looking for a better coin. And in doing so, they never allow their edge to play out. Now, I want to talk about something that took me years to understand. Consistency isn't about controlling the market. It's about controlling yourself. The market is going to do what it does. It's indifferent to you. It doesn't care about your bills, your goals, your last trade, or your next trade. It just is. But you can choose how you show up. You can choose your mental environment. And this is where most traders fail. They show up to the market in a reactive state. They're carrying yesterday's loss, last week's drawdown, last month's frustration. They're trading with emotional baggage. And that baggage distorts their perception. You've probably experienced this. You take a loss, and suddenly every chart looks dangerous. You see risk everywhere. You start inventing reasons not to take trades that perfectly match your system. Or, on the flip side, you take a big win, and suddenly you feel invincible. You start seeing setups that aren't really there, taking trades outside your plan because you're feeling lucky. Both of these states, fear and overconfidence, are distortions. They're your emotions coloring your perception. And distorted perception leads to inconsistent execution. So the question becomes, how do you create a mental environment where you can execute cleanly, trade after trade, regardless of what just happened? It starts with a pre-trade routine. Before I take any trade, I ask myself a series of questions. Have I identified this setup according to my system? Is my risk defined and acceptable? Am I emotionally neutral about the outcome? That last one is key. If I notice I'm hoping too hard for this trade to work, or if I'm hesitating because I'm afraid, that's a red flag. That means I'm attached. And attachment clouds judgment. When I notice attachment, I pause. I remind myself, this is one trade in a series. The outcome of this trade means nothing about me or my system. I'm just executing my edge. And then I take the trade. No drama, no internal negotiation, just execution. Over time, this becomes automatic. You train your mind to separate the action of entering a trade from the outcome of that trade. You create a mental buffer. And in that buffer, you find consistency. Let me share something that changed everything for me. I stopped trying to avoid losses, and I started accepting them. That might sound strange. Of course, you want to avoid losses, right? You want to win. That's the whole point. But here's what I realized. The energy I was spending trying to avoid losses, analyzing more, waiting for perfect setups, hesitating, second-guessing, that energy was actually making me a worse trader, because I was operating from a place of fear. And fear makes you rigid. Fear makes you reactive. Fear makes you abandon your system at the worst possible times. When I finally accepted that losses were inevitable, not just intellectually, but emotionally, something shifted. I stopped seeing losses as failures. I started seeing them as costs of doing business. Think about any business. A restaurant has food costs. A retailer has inventory costs. A trader has losing trades. It's just the cost of participating in the game. And once I accepted that, once I truly made peace with it, I could execute without hesitation. Because I wasn't afraid anymore. I wasn't afraid of being wrong. I wasn't afraid of losing money. I wasn't afraid of what a loss would mean about me. I was just playing my edge, trade after trade, letting the probabilities unfold. And here's the paradox. The moment I stopped trying so hard to avoid losses, I started trading better. My execution improved. My consistency improved. And yes, my results improved. Not because I found some magical strategy, but because I got out of my own way. So let's come back to where we started. You've taken a loss. You're looking at the next setup, and you feel that hesitation creeping in. What do? First, recognize what's happening. You're experiencing fear. That's normal. That's your brain trying to protect you. Acknowledge it. I'm feeling fear right now. Second, remind yourself of the truth. This trade is independent of the last trade. The market doesn't remember your last loss. The probabilities haven't changed. Your edge is still valid. Third, ask yourself, Does this setup match my system? If yes, your job is to execute, not to predict, not to hope, just to execute. And fourth, and this is crucial, take the trade with the full acceptance that it might lose. Go into it knowing that this could be another loser, and that's okay. Because you're not trading for this one outcome. You're trading for the series. That's it. That's the process. No drama. No internal battle. Just setup identified, risk defined, trade taken. And then, regardless of the outcome, you do it again. And again. And again. Because that's what consistent traders do. They execute their edge over and over without attachment to any single result. They understand that trading isn't about being right. It's about being consistent. If you take nothing else from this, take this. The market will always be uncertain. You will never eliminate risk. You will never stop taking losses. But you can change your relationship with uncertainty. You can change your relationship with risk. You can change your relationship with losing. And when you do, when you truly accept the probabilistic nature of trading, when you let go of the need to be right, when you trust your process more than your fears, you become free. Free to execute. Free to be consistent. Free to let your edge play out. The next trade you take after a loss isn't just a trade. It's a statement. It's you saying, I trust my system. I trust the probabilities. I trust myself to handle whatever outcome occurs. That's the mark of a professional trader. Not someone who never loses. Someone who loses, accepts it, and takes the next trade anyway. That's the path forward. And it starts with the very next trade.